we're so excited to have you both. We have with us Dr. Meisha Porter. I got to put some respect on her name.
Yes. That's right.
and Meisha, you are family,
Yes.
right? I mean, you and David go way, way back.
Way back,
At the
girl.
beginning, right? Of both of your like educational careers, and you started out in an education nonprofit.
Yep.
Then went on to be a principal and a superintendent and the first Black woman chancellor of the city of New York.
Yes.
Holla, right?
Holla.
Then you went on to run a foundation in the Bronx, and now you are at the Innovation
Center
Institute.
for Educational Innovation. Yep.
And your roots are deep BX.
You know,
so,
DBX, so focused on building CEI Bronx, really excited about that.
Yeah, we love you, and you are our sister.
Love
and
you
we're
too.
Always happy to be in
And
conversation
you look
with
fabulous.
You know,
That's what I'm
David,
saying.
you know, I'm Asian backwards.
Wait a minute.
So, you know, it's this freedom life. It's
I'm
freedom
telling you,
life.
right?
I just saw the tattoo on his foot, though. Okay, we're going to talk about that later.
You didn't notice it on the other one as well. Pay attention.
All right. You got any tattoos, Bobby?
I got no tattoos.
Okay, it's all right. It's all right.
But we love the jacket.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Getting ready for the Olympics. Team
I love
USA.
it. I love it.
That's right.
So we're joined by a Brooklyn Assemblyman,
Yes.
Bobby Carroll, who has just been amazing. To me, you have been the leading voice in state government focused on literacy. You've been the champion.
Mm-hmm.
There are others who really care about this work, but you have been the champion. That certainly was my experience as chancellor when I first met you. I know you had the Assembly's Committee on Libraries and educational technology. You've passed landmark legislation around dyslexia. You yourself dyslexic. We want to talk about that a little bit as well. But really, as the one who's really focused on, like, what does it take for us to ensure that every child is a confident reader, and that a structured approach to literacy is what we really need. And that's some of the work we try to do with NYC Reads and the science of reading. But welcome to our home, Bobby.
Well, look, you have a beautiful home. Thank you, David. Thank you, Sheena, for having me. And look, literacy changed my life. And I think for people who it was easy to learn how to read, sometimes maybe they're a little glib about that they don't realize that it's hard for a lot of folks. And there are a lot of folks who don't get the right instruction.
Yeah.
And so we got to change that.
Absolutely. And that's why we're glad that you're both here. And in fact, Bobby, why don't you set the context for us a little bit?
Yeah.
Some of your own personal story and just what this looks like as a crisis across the nation, across New York State, even in New York City with the efforts that we've made. Just from your perspective, where do you see all this?
So, the literacy crisis it's profound. 1 in 7 American adults is functionally illiterate. And there's a lot of reasons for that. My own story is, I was a kid growing up in Brooklyn. I was going to PS 230 in Kensington. I was a precocious, chatty kid. Couldn't really read a lick. Struggled so much, was struggling so much in first grade. And I was so lucky to have a public school teacher who she didn't wish it away. She didn't say, oh, he's a boy or he's young for his age or he'll catch up. She was well-informed and thoughtful, and she had told my parents that she thought I had dyslexia. And I got lucky again where my parents had the means to bring me to Columbia University Medical Center to get me a neuropsychological evaluation that was able to diagnose that dyslexia. And then I got lucky a third time where in the middle of second grade, I left PS 230 and I went to a school called the Gateway School for the rest of elementary school, which specialized in teaching kids with dyslexia. And then for middle school, I went to the Windward School, another school that specializes in educating children with dyslexia. But, I have 2 little kids myself. And my 3.5-year-old, who's in 3K, which is a wonderful program, if he has the same struggles as me, I want him to go up the block to the school on our corner.
Yes.
I don't want him to be segregated from his friends, from his neighborhood. And we can do that. And I know how lucky, I didn't think I was lucky at 7 years old. And I sure didn't like being the only kid from Brooklyn in any of these schools. But I know how lucky I am that my parents had the means and the opportunity to do that. And the vast majority of kids anywhere in America just don't have that opportunity. So we need to solve this in public schools. And one of the best things in my career in the legislature, David, was working with you while you were the New York City Chancellor. You so knew that there was excellence in all of our students in public schools, and so knew that if we can solve this problem,
Yeah.
it's going to help us solve so many other problems.
Yeah, yeah. I'm going to tell you a little bit about how we knew it, because there were a lot of things that we were doing even before that. But Meisha, what are some of your...
Well, I have a different story. I grew up reading. We ate books. Like I was the kid who had a book under my desk, and so loved reading. Didn't really, didn't struggle with literacy reading myself personally, but really was confronted with it as a school leader. David, our first year opening LGJ, we had a student who
School
came
for
to
Law,
us as
Government and Justice.
a ninth grader. Yeah. Who was a 17-year-old ninth grader who came to us unable to read. And we had 64 new ninth graders. We were starting a school. We had 5 teachers. We had 1 English teacher who was a high school English teacher who didn't have the tools to teach that young man to read. And it was something that sat with me as an educator early in my career. How are we allowing kids to get to ninth grade not being able to read? Fast forward, I'm superintendent in District 11, and I'm responsible for a school that I will not name, but has had single-digit proficiency rates for generations.
Which means what?
Which means that the students were performing below proficiency at 2 and 3%. Right?
So 98%
So
were not
98%
proficient.
of the kids in the school were
Could not read.
proficient, could not read.
For generations.
For generations. And folks in the highest levels of the DOE were like, it's a nice principal, just work with her. I ran into one of my former students from LGJ, and this student came to us as a ninth grader when I was principal at this time, and he could not read. He read on a 3rd grade level, and he was a bilingual student. And I realized, because he came to visit me as superintendent, that he went to that elementary school.
Have mercy.
And that shifted for me. It was like, this system cannot allow leaders to sit in seats and be responsible for generational failure. And that, for me, is like the biggest story. Is it's not simply what do we need to do to fix the reading issue. It is, what are we allowing to persist in our system? In what neighborhoods, to your point, Bobby,
Resources.
about we deserve, every student in every community deserves a great school a block away, 2 blocks away from them. But where are the neighborhoods? And this school was in the middle of Edenwald projects.
Right.
What neighborhoods are we going to allow persistent failure to continue? And that was my driver. It pushed the way I selected leaders, how I held leaders accountable, and what I thought was my responsibility to young people that I had been given the honor and privilege to serve.
Right. Yeah. And you both touch on many important points, but one important point, how the hell did we get here?
Yeah. 1
in 7 Americans are functionally illiterate. We have schools that are producing with 98% of kids in whole cities, right? In Detroit, right? It's 98% of kids are not proficient. So it feels crazy and outrageous, and why people are not marching in the streets around this. And, as David knows, when I was running the United Way, as you know, for a decade, I joined the National Campaign for Grade Level Reading, where they did a study in 2010 that said it is the biggest predictor of whether or not you graduate from high school. But also, I was in touch with, because I'm a corporate lawyer as well, people who basically issued municipal bonds.
Yeah.
And they actually would say, how much do we need to issue? Because how many jail beds do we need to build in 8 years? If the 3rd grade reading scores are here, they would go through the algorithm. We'll need these many jail beds. Because what are you going to do if you're 17 years old and you can't read?
Yeah.
And the fact that how did we get here, and why hasn't there been a massive outcry nationally, and certainly from Black and brown communities, because we have it worse, and certainly, are constrained by lack of resources.
And you definitely deserve flowers. In District 7 today, the work that the United Way did to boost literacy scores, outcomes, folks talk about today. So I want to make sure that even on this platform that we give you your flowers, that there are leaders in District 7 right now, a few blocks from where we sit, who are really thankful for your work and your commitment to literacy. And, I think to the outrage, right? It is something that it seems America is okay with, right? you had resources, so your parents were able to make a difference for you. But even in the neighborhood you grew up in, even in the household you grew up in, even in the neighborhood and community, and we're a little different, Bobby, you know? Illiteracy was still a problem. And so while it absolutely affects Black and brown communities greater,
affects everybody.
it affects everyone. And so we have to really think about why is America okay with being illiterate?
Why? Why is America okay?
You know, well, I think also, and you all are educators, I'm not, but I think when we have adults in the room who sometimes aren't realizing that we need to center the children in the room, and that learning how to read is a difficult skill, but it's a skill that there are sequential steps that we can take to make sure everybody can read. And I think there were too many clever ideas that made it feel like we were jumping all the way to the end, you know? And I think in big blue cities, you know, we want progressive education, right? We want education that allows people to have agency, allows people to see themselves in curriculum, allows them to do all of that. But what we forgot is that before you get to do all that, you need to have that foundation before you can soar. And so we kind of skipped all the way to the end instead of saying, hey, just a second, right? We get a little too partisan sometimes. We said, you know what? Giving these kids a rock solid foundation is then going to allow us in middle school, high school, outside of school to say, hey, you are allowed to go and chart a different path. And the unfortunate thing is also, I think, when we talk about structural problems and racial problems in America, when you looked at neighborhoods like mine in District 15 that was, you know, more white than the city average, more wealthy than the city average, and they're adopting whole language curriculums, right, that are a lot of vibes, not a lot of proof. But of course, parents from lower income neighborhoods, more disadvantaged backgrounds say, well, the kids there seem to be getting into good colleges, going off to good things. So let's just do what they do. And then magically, and of course, what those parents weren't telling folks is that not only were kids getting tutors, kids being taken out of schools, but look, I mean, I remember, you know, kids are smart. I remember parents. I mean, I remember lying about where I went to school for 6, 7 years. I remember parents questioning my mom and dad. We were not poor, but we were not rich. Why is your son going to a private school, right? Why is he doing this? And, you know, it was hurtful. And instead of saying, hey, we should be able to, you know, address this problem. And my mom, I got to give her a lot of credit. Everybody needs a good mom.
That's right. Don't make a mama angry.
But, you know, not only was she, you know, my fiercest advocate, but after she kind of got me on my way, you know, she went back to school, became a reading teacher, and was an Orton Gillingham reading teacher in New York City public schools for 20 years.
Wow. That's amazing.
And
because she wanted other kids to have what her child had.
Exactly.
That's amazing.
And there are so many of those
We love your mom. Shout out to Bobby's mom.
Shout out to mom.
Absolutely.
Right. And you all have those stories too, right? And so I think sometimes also, and we were just talking about the budget hearing that was yesterday in Albany. You know, I get why people get their back up if you start talking about what the test scores are currently or what's going on. People can get defensive. And it's not about laying blame at one specific individual. It's about saying, just a second, we've got structural problems in a system and we know how to rebuild, right?
That's right.
We know what the map is, and so let's go do it.
Yeah.
Because that, if you want to talk about an affordability agenda, you want to talk about people staying in New York, somebody's kids got a good school.
Exactly.
That's who they care about most.
Yeah.
They're not going to move to North Carolina suddenly or
That's right.
Florida.
That's right.
Yeah.
I was an elementary school teacher in Brooklyn, in you know, District 17, the Crown Heights section of Brooklyn. And I remember watching early in my career as a young teacher as we were shifting from kind of phonics, if you will, to this more progressive thing that they were calling, you know, balanced literacy. And I remember so many of the teachers were the old teachers who had been around for a long time, the experienced teachers, said, why the heck are we doing this? And it was almost like the March of the Lemons. You know, as you watched, everybody else was doing it. And so every district just started to adopt it and figured this was the new way that we should be going. And I think over time, we began to realize that to some degree, we were sold a bill of goods. And particularly for kids of color who did not have all the other additional resources that are needed.
Foundational.
I don't think anybody did it with bad intentions, but I certainly called out Lucy Calkins and her program up at Teachers College. And in fact, I remember when the new president at Columbia University had come in.
Manoush Shafiq.
Manoush Shafiq, yeah. She was announced, and they were welcoming her here in Harlem. And I was invited to a breakfast, and she heard from a wide range of community leaders. And then when I spoke, I said to her, I just want you to know what the reading scores in New York City were, and they were absolutely abysmal. 64% of black children could not read on grade level. 63% of Latino kids. If you went to the city of Philadelphia, it was 66%. Chicago, 80% of the entire school system in Chicago. And the worst was 90% in the city of Detroit. These numbers were just horrendous. And I said, if there's any one place that we can lay blame, I'm laying blame at Columbia University, Teachers College, and Lucy Calkins. She pulled out her notebook and she started writing these notes down. And a month after that meeting, she removed Lucy Calkins stepped down. And I think the pressure that we were building played a huge role in that happening. And we said, we have to chart a new course if we want to ensure that our kids are going to be successful. So it's just to what you said when you said, where did it come from?
Right.
How did it happen?
Well, go ahead, Bobby.
I was going to say, look, what you did, David, when I first got to the assembly, I felt like I was screaming into the wind.
Yeah.
What you and Mayor Adams did of saying having two people of such status.
Right. And he
saying,
was dyslexic.
Yes, saying we can't do this and we are not going to allow to continue to pretend that, whole language pedagogies are actually the way children learn how to read, because they're not. And so that was, monumental, I think, especially for a big urban democratic city to do that, right? Because we've got a lot of examples of places that have reformed themselves, but Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, they have different structural problems though too, right? There are other things that they do that we probably don't want to match, and so seeing a big blue city do that,
and in public,
groundbreaking.
It seems in public education, we always go outside for a solution. We never go inside, right? To your point, David, like the teachers were like, why are we making this shift? You know why? Because the teachers know what Bobby and Meisha need to learn. And so it seems we always go outside. I remember when the Common Core was coming, and I always said to people, textbook companies are going to put a new sticker on their book that says Common Core aligned, right? Now it's going to be the science of reading is going to be a sticker. And we continue to lean in outside of our sector instead of going internal and really thinking the work is really about, like, what are we doing to develop teachers to be teachers of reading? What are we doing to ensure that all teachers have a foundational understanding, whether you're a math teacher, science teacher, social studies, have a foundational understanding of what it means to help young people get literate? And that is an internal developing of people thing that needs to happen.
And I think, there's a few things here that I want to kind of double click on. And I do want to kind of get back to why there's no outrage, because I don't think we really, so there was, I think what you all were describing was like, there was this newfangled fancy way to teach kids to read, and everybody just started doing it, right? Yeah. And it wasn't just, Lucy Calkins, it was a bunch of
things.
And a lot of people did it. And also education is a business.
Yes.
So you touched on that.
Big business.
It's a multi-billion-dollar business. And so, those things generate revenue, the newest thing, the hottest thing, the newest thing, the hottest thing, without understanding the core. But, we are fundamentally kind of crippled as a nation if our people can't read and process, because if you haven't learned to read, you can't read to learn. And we fall farther and farther behind in innovation and all of the things. And somehow, and there is a racial dynamic as well.
Absolutely.
Right? Frederick Douglass famously said, once you learn to read, you'll forever be free. And we know in our history, it was against the law for Black people to learn how to read, like on pain of death. So there's a lot, all of that in there. And we're at this moment where you talked about Mississippi and Alabama and these places that we think are, quote unquote backwards, right? Yeah. And so, like, what do they get And why did it take us so long? And now what do we have to do to continue to move forward?
It's a big question.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think there also is like a level of, there has been prior to, I think, the work that you did, David, bringing New York City Reads, bringing it to the forefront of the agenda. I would say that you started a national conversation about literacy. There was a complacency around it, right?
Yes.
Like, just let folks do whatever it is that they do, right? Like, how do you manage such a large system like New York City? And so there was never really a sense of urgency that you could shift the system in such a big way.
Because it's so big,
because it's so big, and it is,
Yeah.
and you don't.
Is it 1 million kids?
It's 1 million kids, and it's 1,800 buildings, and
Wow.
God knows how many classrooms that turns into. And so I think the shift was really powerful, because I would also say, for the first time, and it's how we got to talking, Bobby, for the first time in a transition of a mayor in this city, there's been one thing in common across folks who care about education, and that's the literacy agenda must stay in place. And so while there was complacency before, I think it was because people didn't know how to solve such a big problem.
Right.
And that doesn't mean that there's not more work to do,
Right.
right? But there is now an energy around, we have the beginnings of a solution, and let's continue to. So from advocates, parents, teachers, leaders. I was with a principal a month ago. I ran into a principal at the car dealership getting a repair, and she was so proud. She had been a first-year principal when I was superintendent, and now she's in whatever year she is in now. And she said to me, "You would be so proud, Meisha. Our scores have jumped up 40%, and we have been like doing this work with fidelity."
Right.
And so it's, what are we doing with leaders to teach them how to lead spaces of strong literacy practices? How are we continuing to develop teachers? And the other place that we haven't gone that we really need to go, and what is higher ed's responsibility
Right.
in turning out teachers who are prepared to teach in New York City public schools, but schools across the country that are fighting the battle of literacy.
That's right. That's right.
I think also one of the things is we haven't had enough leaders talk about struggling to learn how to read.
We mean leaders like political leaders?
Political leaders, education leaders. I mean, there's a whole host of folks, business leaders, sports leaders, right? So I think too often, right, what's one of the things that if you're hanging out with a bunch of parents who've got young kids in first, second, third grade, what are they going to start talking about? Oh, well, Johnny reads at a third grade reading level. Johnny does it, right? It is so synonymous kind of with intelligence, right? It is a shorthand. And, that's baked into our society, right? I mean, even if you look at the metrics on standardized tests like the SAT, right? The way that they kind of cull the herd is it's a speed reading exam.
Right.
That's one of the main ways that they figure out, how do we make sure kids don't finish the test or have that was one, and they say they've fixed it, but that was one of always their biggest ways to kind of, create their bell curve. Sure. And so when that is synonymous with intelligence,
right,
the idea you're going to have leaders in any space talk about how big an issue this is and how important it is. I think people, they don't talk about it. They're closeted about it. And English is unique, right? We all know that there are 46 sounds. We all know that you need to be able to blend those sounds together and recognize them to be able to read, and you need to be able to do it quickly and with accuracy so you have fluency so you can comprehend. Average people don't know that, but also English, because it's not perfectly phonetic.
Right.
It's not Spanish. It's not Finnish. It's not Italian. It's not even Japanese. In those places, guess what? They don't have spelling bees. And, the reason they don't have spelling bees is because the entire language is phonetic. And so you go, just a second,
So
we're
it's
of course
the
going to
sounds.
teach, and we're going to teach the rules, because why wouldn't we do that? And our language is mostly phonetic, but we always think that there's a shortcut, right? Lucy Calkins deserves a lot of blame. So does Fontes and Pinnell.
That's right.
But Horace Mann, he's not a bad person, but Horace Mann was a person who kind of believed in whole language approaches to literacy. And so I think there's always, maybe it's something in English-speaking countries, maybe it's something that's unique to America, But I think there's a lot of people who want to make a shortcut, right?
Yeah.
And we need to realize that giving children those hard skills then allows you, again, right, to do the knowledge building, to do the agency, to see that, right, to all the stuff that I think young men and women who want to go into teaching, that's why they get jazzed by teaching, right? They might not say, it's like if you're, coaching a football team or a basketball team, right? You might not be, the thing I really want to do is drills all day. No, it's I want to draw up an offense, a defense.
Yeah.
I want to come up with something clever. But if the guys can't do the drills, they're never going to be able to do
That's right. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. My first day as chancellor, I remember, and I've told this story, getting ready to go up the steps to go into the building, our headquarters for the New York City Public Schools. And there was a guy standing outside, an older white guy holding a sign. He'd been out there for years. And the sign simply said, if we would just teach the kids to read. Yeah. And I said, I'm going to go over there and just say to him, I agree with him. And I remember my driver saying, don't go. That guy's crazy. He's been out there for years and years. He just talks to people walking up and down the street. So they kind of wrote him off as the crazy guy. And I said, that's all right. And I walked over and I just said, I introduced myself. He said, I know who you are. He said, congratulations and wish you the best. He said, I just want you to know I agree with you. And he said, it would save you lots of money. Your system spends millions of dollars trying to catch kids up. If you got it right in the beginning, it would just be better for the whole entire system. And so I said, so just keep your eye. We're going to be, but I never forgot him. Yeah. And he was a retired educator from Ohio. We became pretty good friends. And I would see him every day. And I told him, I said, Bill, one day I'm going to retire you from here. Because we're going to make sure we get this right. And I remember when we announced NYC Reads, and really one of our best partners, really, and it would not have happened had it not been also for partnering with Michael Mogul and the U of T. Yes. When I became chancellor, another thing people told me, that's going to be your toughest challenge, dealing with the union. Like the union was the boogeyman. Mm-hmm. And I found it to be anything but. And the relationship that Michael and I forged was a great one. Yeah. And he said, this is what our teachers need. Leaving it up to every teacher and every school to figure out their own way and then criticizing them when they get it wrong, that's not the best way to lead a system. And so he was a huge supporter. So big shout out to him as well as Henry Rubio at the CSA as we placed a big bet on the leaders to really drive this work as well. But I think that was the deal. And then ultimately, Meisha, I think you're right. We said, I called a meeting with all of the schools of education where we got our teachers from. And we basically pulled them in the room and said, this is the direction that we're going. Yeah. And if you are expecting for us to hire your graduates, we're expecting for you to start that process of getting on board and teaching them on the front end, the science of reading so that they come in already ready. And we don't have to just start from the very beginning once they get here. So, but this is a multi-year approach. Yes. You don't just get there and arrive on day one. It'll take some time, but I think you're right. You said we kind of set the system in the right direction.
Yeah, and it also, everyone wants to come in and make a big splash and do a big thing. So I'm going to reform the system, right? No one wants to take the simple thing, which is the big thing, which is reading and math, literacy and numeracy. How about we just do that? Right. How about we do that really, really well?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And Bobby, you said something that I want to make sure we don't lose. Just because you're struggling with reading, that has nothing to do with intellect.
That's right.
Yeah. And some of the smartest people ever are dyslexic and struggle with reading. And once we can get past that shame that people are kind of projected onto them, we can open up the conversation and really understand like how many people this is impacting and do something about it. But also, I mean, you guys are educators and policymakers at a system level, but then there's a lot of just parents, like in community. Like there's a role for community to play.
Absolutely.
And parents, like what should community and parents, what role do they play in helping to address this issue?
This is not an issue that starts in the schoolhouse.
Right.
This is an issue that starts at the birth. Birth. It starts with how a hospital sending mothers home with their babies, and in Switzerland they do baby boxes. We need to do literacy boxes out the hospital. We need to give parents tools. Every single parent, not just parents in the South Bronx.
That's right.
I was an English teacher, but I wasn't a literacy teacher. Those are two different things. I was a high school English teacher. An early elementary literacy teacher is a very different thing, right? Like, so we have to make sure that we are making this a city that reads, and that we recognize that everybody has a role in that. And so when a baby is born and a mom is going home and a dad is going home with their baby, what literacy tools are they taking home with them? You know, even in utero, how are we reading stories to our babies in utero?
That's right.
Our nonprofit organizations that are supporting after school programming, they're a part of our literacy journey. They have young people that are working in those programs, that have relationships with young people. How are they part of the literacy story? And so we get caught up in that it lands at school.
Right.
It doesn't land. It lands at school, of course. School is the foundational space. But when we talk about why people are literate, they're literate because they started engaging with literacy tools at home. They started, numbers and sounds in Sesame Street, right? It starts at home. It starts in community.
Going to the supermarket.
Yes,
It talks about what you do in utero, as
at
you said.
church,
Right.
right? Sunday school,
Right. Reading while the child is still in the womb.
Yeah.
There's research around effect that actually has on children. What are your thoughts, Bobby?
Well, I think that we also need to make sure that parents, right? I think pediatricians, and then also knowing that, if your child does have a reading problem, right? If your child is not making progress,
When do you know?
it doesn't magically just go away, right? That children who are progressing, and this is for children, and that's why having a good foundational tier 1 supports in our schools that we know are rooted in structured literacy is so important, that we should see real market gains with reading in kindergarten, first and second grade, even if children maybe have not had all the advantages at home. And so if your child is having reading difficulty, it will persist unless you make a change, right? And, I think that making sure that pediatricians know that, making sure that there is real conversations, the way we've had conversations about social skills and autism and the like over the last number of years, where people are much more aware of, the autism spectrum. Now, literacy is on a continuum. It's a different issue, but, to make sure parents are aware of that, I think is critical. And then also to realize, I think one of the reasons why, again, this becomes such a huge issue for parents and why they, get very defensive and are very worried about it, is because in kindergarten, first, second grade, school is almost exclusively about reading.
Yeah.
Right.
And so now what we've done, right, is say the thing that you may have a weakness in, first, we need to remediate. It's so important that we have to get you to a place where you are a confident and fluid and fluent reader. But it's an everyday struggle.
Yeah.
Right? And so that creates real emotional issues. That creates real strife of why kids think that they're dumb or why kids think that this is not for them. Where, imagine if the entire school day from kindergarten through second or third grade was purely about visual arts, right? There would be a whole host of kids who go, what is this? I'm not good at that.
Right.
Yeah, I'd be left out.
I don't, but it's about literacy.
Yeah.
And we have to be honest about that. And so we need to be, as Meisha was saying, right, doing the simple things, right? All, you go and look at all the greats and whatever they are. They magically do all the simple things right? They do amazing things that are complex, and that's maybe why we look at them and say, how did he or she do that? But they do all the simple things
Gotta
right.
get the
Really well.
And I think, it's definitely the young person, but you also hit on something as a parent.
Absolutely.
You feel like, what am I doing wrong?
Yep.
Right? If my child is struggling, then I'm doing something wrong. And that is not necessarily the case. But also equipping teachers, which you've talked about, and systems with structure and tools. But, where's the place for parents to get the support that they need? How do I support my struggling reader? And it's okay, they're struggling. There's nothing fundamentally wrong with them. They learn differently, and how do I make sure that they have the supports that they need?
And that they have access to resources to solve problems that they can't solve on their own.
Right.
I love what you said about like, where's the pediatrician in this conversation? What's it, when you are doing those, annual checkups, are you talking about the developmental skills that your child is maybe not meeting the markers on? I think we have a real opportunity, though, in we alluded a little bit to affordability. I think education is the primary affordability agenda, right? Like, but we're gonna have childcare, right? There's a childcare priority in New York City for 2-year-olds. What role does literacy play in that?
Yeah.
This is not just about babysitting.
That's right.
Right? This has got to be about what opportunities do we now have if we have 2-year-olds in childcare that the city is funding? Where's the literacy agenda in that space?
Well, and I think for most kids, right, the vast majority of kids don't have dyslexia. Right. Like, let's be clear.
Right.
85% of the kids don't have dyslexia. And they will, if they are exposed to language, if they are provided a structured approach to literacy, they're going to make great gains.
That's right.
And that's where 2K and 3K and pre-K, if you do it right, should really help make up the differences between low-income kids and wealthier kids, or kids who've got, just more advantage in life. I do always, though, because I come at this from somebody who struggled to learn how to read, if your son or daughter has dyslexia, it's not a 6-month boot camp to get them to learn how to read. And it is, you can be a strong student, you can be strong academically, but it's going to take years, right? I was lucky enough that I was in schools for about 6 years that exclusively, taught children with dyslexia, right? But that allowed me to be successful in high school, college, law school, right? That allowed me. And so we have to be, because I do think sometimes parents go, right,
it's gonna be
we
quick.
name it, and then there's a magic pill, and here's Dumbo's feather, or here's this, and it's solved. And for a child who really has a deficit in phonological awareness, it's going to take so much more time, because language, right, spoken word is natural. Human beings have been speaking for hundreds of thousands of years. We've been writing for 5,000 or 6,000. And we've been writing in complex ways maybe for only like 3,000 or 4,000 years. So that tells you a little bit that just like we were about as smart as we were a couple 100,000 years ago, only just start writing. That is a learned skill. That's not a natural skill. Speaking is natural. And so parents always think, well, my son or daughter started to speak magically. By osmosis, they're going to learn to read. They're not. And it's a learned skill. In children with dyslexia and phonological awareness issues, the part of the brain, basically, that we use to map reading is the place where we kind of store people's faces and are able to name things rapidly, right? These are some of the tricks of kind of trying to figure out if a young person, can they name things rapidly? Can they rhyme? That's the part of the brain that takes all of that over. And there's a deficit there. And so you literally, when you teach a child who has dyslexia to read, you map that skill somewhere else in the brain. And that's why even, folks who have dyslexia who are completely literate and are good readers and writers, that's why they almost all still read more slowly than the average person. It's the reason why they almost all are kind of worse spellers than the average person. It's because they're using a part of their brain that actually is not the place that you should do that. And that's the amazing thing of the human brain, right? That we can do these things. But I want to make sure that a mom or dad who goes and says, I think my son or daughter has dyslexia, it's not 6 months of summer school, right? It's going to be a couple of years at least. And it's going to be something that I would hope that progressive education, as we go further, that we realize that we can build the school day once we get those foundational skills around the strengths of our students and the interests of our students, so that we don't box. Trying to teach me Spanish or Italian in high school, it's a really bad idea.
Let me ask you this, Meisha, and then I'm going to ask you on the local level in New York City under this administration, and Bobby, I'm going to come back to you about just a larger view on the state level. Mayor Mamdani, in a disappointing way to me, really never expressed any education vision as he was running for office. And now that he's been elected, we still have not heard much in terms of a real vision. What do we need to do to ensure, right, like that NYC Reads, this focus on literacy, really does maintain itself in light of all of these financial challenges, major cuts that are coming? I imagine they're going to hit New York City public schools in a very significant way. What are the things that need to be happening to ensure that we don't miss out in terms of literacy?
Well, I think there is a foundation already at New York City Public Schools. I think Chancellor Samuels is aware of that foundation because he's been a part of moving that work. And so how do we double down on what's there? And I know that Mayor Mamdani is going to have some pressures to make some cuts across the city. If we believe in working class people and if we want to really build a city that folks can afford to live in, then we have to continue to invest in education. And we have to, remove the stigma of who can and who can't, who needs and who doesn't, the haves and the have-nots. And we have to make investments in the areas of greatest need. Right. And right now that's literacy. We know it's mathematics. And we know what communities need the greatest investment. I think there also has to be an investment in developing teachers' capacity to be teachers of reading, right? Not just English teachers, and I say that as an English teacher, a high school English teacher, but teaching reading. And so, I mean, my number one priority would be, as you are looking at what needs to be cut across the city, save education, prioritize children and families, because for many young people across this city, where they are learning to read is in school. What's developing those skills for them are the teachers and leaders at their school buildings.
And while I think that certainly the Chancellor Samuels gets it, I think we're going to probably have to have some extended efforts politically to make sure, because I've been very worried that the mayor doesn't speak much about education at all. I don't know that it is a major priority of his. And I'm very concerned that some of the cuts and whatnot, education may be one of the major places. And even if it is, we have to make sure that the work around literacy is in fact protected. Bobby, what give us a sense of what's happening around the state on literacy?
So, I mean, there are a couple of exciting things that are real positive developments. First, I'm going to go outside of New York, and let's talk about California, right? That's our closest, most similar state. And Governor Newsom, who also has dyslexia, he just signed into law the Science of Reading law in California and dedicated almost $500 million towards teacher training in evidence-based literacy reforms. That's a huge break in the dam. I happen to carry that same bill in the New York State Legislature. We need to do that, right? We need a statewide mandate that creates a floor. It doesn't say that we're going to go right into every classroom and dictate every little thing, but we need a floor so we don't fall backwards. You know, if this is a civil rights issue, we need to gird it with good laws and good budgets that make sure that folks have the resources and the tools to move forward. And so that is my main focus. You know, we've done a lot in the last 3 years around dyslexia, and I'm proud about that, right? Because that affected me. We just passed the Dyslexia and Dysgraphia Center law, which is going to, for the first time, have state ed have a center to come up with a definition, come up with teacher training, come up with curriculum for public schools throughout the state. And that's really a first in the nation bill. We had another first in the nation bill that requires private insurance companies to cover the cost of neuropsychological exams.
That's amazing.
So that it doesn't stop a parent who goes and says, I don't have $5,000. I'm never going to have $5,000. But we need to make sure that we do the baseline and have those structured and sequential literacy requirements, for every school. We're doing great work with John King and the micro-credential at SUNY New Paltz. There's a lot of great little things. We need to kind of put everything together. And, I think that what hopefully Chancellor Samuels sees, and I think he does, you can't have agency if you can't read, right?
That's right.
Sheena, you quoted Frederick Douglass, right? If you care about civil rights in our country, right? At the core of it, right? You're talking about one group of people denying agency to another group of people, right? Stopping them from having their full potential. And lots of really cruel and terrible things happen because of that. but Douglas talking about, I will always be free if I can read, right? Is that this power, right? The power that if you can self-actualize and you can go do things, and technology now, right?
Yes.
Can really allow folks to do stuff. There's no better place to be born today, I still believe, than being born in New York City. But if you can't read, if you can't actually access all the gifts that are here, then somebody from across the country or across an ocean is going to be able to take your job, take your opportunity, take your idea. And
it's not AI.
Well, it's not AI, and look, and I worry about AI, right?
Yeah.
I worry that I have a bill to say, look, we should not be just AI K through 8, do it all. That, we should be using it in very specific ways for diagnostic tools, because we know how to teach kids and we know what we need to do. And we don't want kids prompting a chat bot and saying, oh, I learned how to read, Mom. Oh, yeah, I read the story. I did the, and you go, what are you doing? Did you make that a video game? And I get worried, because
it's got to be a tool for us.
That's the new shortcut, right?
Right.
We'll say,
That's right.
There was a shortcut 40 years ago, and everyone was well intentioned. Someone said, this is the shortcut.
Well, the
budgets are
shortcut is
expensive.
useless if you don't understand what the shortcut is giving you back, right?
Right.
If you can't read and comprehend.
Well, exactly. And that's why you don't want to take them most of the time, right?
I just want to add, I do think what you said is really important. It really is also about how are we bringing all the pieces together? I'm on the board, of the Literacy Academy Collective. The first dyslexia school in New York City opened, the second school in Brooklyn, part of the Path Forward Steering Committee that's about higher ed. Coming together to think about how we're teaching literacy. Yeah, shout out to don't make moms mad, because then they start their own school and they take over the system.
It's amazing advocates.
Amazing, but it really is about where is the space, and maybe it's us guys. Maybe we got to create the space. Where are we bringing all of these parties together? To say to Mayor Mamdani and to say to Chancellor Samuels, this is actually the path forward for literacy across New York City. We are happy to deliver the agenda to you, because there's so many different parts of it that we're all working on, and we really need to bring them together.
To help the rest of the state.
And help the rest of the state, for sure.
And look, and I'm a big supporter of Mayor Mamdani.
Yes.
And I'm excited about his mayoralty. But, one of the problems with politics is that, these issues that are actually small, but they act as like, a litmus test for what kind of person are you, take up way too much space. So, 3,000 kids go to Stuyvesant. My older brother went to Stuyvesant. It's a good school for a lot of kids, not a Wright school for a lot of kids. But at the end of the day, in a system that's almost 1 million kids, it's 3,000 kids.
That's right.
And so why every year in Albany, somebody starts talking about like, well, are we going to change the SHSAT? Are we going to change, a gifted and talented program? And what I would love to see is to say, can we start talking about the macro things, about what affect all of our kids?
That's right.
And because parents, look, they love their kids, right? They love their kids, want their kids to be successful. And so how can we create a political movement and an education movement that says, this is going to help all of your kids.
That's
It's going to make all kids successful. Because I get why when people feel like the system doesn't work for them, then it's like, well, look, maybe it is gifted and talented, or maybe it's Stuyvesant, maybe it's that all the resources are going over there, or maybe this. And look, I'm not a lover of gifted and talented. I'm not a lover of Stuyvesant. I think good schools work if all kids have successful skills, because they all have different talents and they learn from things.
That's right.
But let's focus on that first. And I think that we'll suddenly see, we'll have better elementary schools, better middle schools, better high schools. Because, if I was a kid, I could have been a kid who said, you know what, can't read. Let me go do something else. Right? And let me check out. And I came from a middle-class background. Maybe I would not have gotten myself into criminal trouble.
Right.
But who knows what I would have done.
Right.
Right? And then, of course, if you're a young person where you go, I don't have any opportunities, right? You always hear of crazy stories of somebody who goes, rags to riches, that, I had the greatest business idea, I can't read, or I can't do this.
Yep.
And they figure it out. But most kids, right, they'll say, well, look, I'm going to opt out and I'm going to do some antisocial things that are going to get me into a lot of trouble.
Yeah. And I think, and I know as we're coming to a close here, to have a call to action. And you guys have talked about, like, you have to keep the pressure on. We've got to bring the pieces together. We've got to think, neighborhood based.
Yeah.
There are things for people to do, but also at the city level, at the state level. And I do want to make a correction because, I realize people can hear the podcast, but they can't always see you. When I mentioned Alabama and Mississippi being backwards, I had air quotes. They are not backwards. Right. And they, on a state level, said, we are going to get the foundational stuff right. Mississippi went from last to almost first.
Yes.
And they
if you
did
control for poverty, they are first.
They're
first.
They're first if you control for poverty.
Absolutely. So shout out to Mississippi, Alabama, and they did it in community, lockstep, lock arms, and so.
And we as Northerners, a lot of times, we think of the Southern states.
My people are from the South, so they have a lot of kind of wherewithal as well, and so. It's important to note that, and I want to make sure that people hear that.
I just want to say one thing, because look, I am a, Comuna Burke and the folks down in Mississippi who did that deserve real credit. They're
leading the nation.
The great thing that New York has, to be positive about New York, is we do have advantages, though, over Mississippi, right? Not only do we have more resources and more opportunity, but because we don't have some of the unbelievable structural inequities that go on still in a place like Mississippi, right? We really can build that progressive education at the end of the tunnel.
Right.
And because of the work that David has done, others have done, where we got to bring everybody together at the table to move that cart, right? Sometimes in some of the states that are more conservative, right, you don't have to get the teachers union involved. You don't have to get certain other stakeholders, that you can go and just do it, right? Because we've got to get everybody at the table and everybody pushing in the right direction. It takes a lot longer.
Yes.
And sometimes a little more expensive. But if we can finally say to folks, look, this is the promised land, right? This is where we're leading you, and we can push. I think we can push a lot harder and a lot further. And that's what we need, is we need to say, hey, California's starting it.
Yep.
And I'm excited about that because they are like us. They are big, diverse, progressive, urban. California can do it.
Come on.
Why are we not passing these bills? Why are we not
and
doing
we got to
this
keep
all
that
together?
pressure on, And New York should be the beacon and the blueprint, really, for the rest of the nation. Final words, Meisha, what action steps, community folks, parents,
I'm leaning into what you talked about, Sheena. This is a grassroots movement, right? It starts with moms and dads and big sisters and brothers. It starts locally. It starts at home. And what are we doing as a community to foster literacy from birth, from the hospital door to home, so that when young people get to childcare at 2 years old, they've already begun to develop those foundational skills? And how are we engaging our medical practitioners so that we can identify early warning signs of dyslexia or inability to process language? So early intervention, early information for moms and dads, so that they know what to do to help Bobby get on to be a great champion for literacy across our city and across the country.
And there's some organizations that are doing
already
doing
it.
Should join.
Reading Partners, Literacy Academy Collective. I mean, there's so many. We can send them all out, but how do we also activate the business community to be a part of this conversation in a very real way?
Yes.
You want a literate workforce?
That's right.
It starts early on. So let's start early, start young. Remember, our communities matter.
Yes,
I love it. Bobby, any final words?
I do this work because the kind of crummy time I had in school, I'd like others not to have in school, right? And maybe a little selfishly, I really hope that my kids don't have that experience. But most importantly, I spend a lot of time talking to parents whose kids are struggling to learn how to read. And there's a better way to do this. And we can do this in a public school. We can do this that doesn't alienate children. We can do this that doesn't, create heartache for parents. And we can do this, most importantly, where teachers and principals have the tools to go out and remediate this issue if we're honest about what the issue is, and we're honest about what are our priorities, right? And we can't prioritize everything. And at different stages of life, we've got to prioritize different things. And early on, I think we've got to prioritize literacy. And it's something that, as long as I'm in public life, I'm going to talk about, because I know how it changed my life. And I know that it changes people's lives. And what Meisha was just saying, you know, if you want a workforce, right? We've got lots of young men and women, right? Too often we forget that there's a lot of women who struggle to learn how to read too.
Yep.
That's right.
Who have deep potential, have deep intellect. They can't get a job because they can't read. They can't go to the doctor because they can't read. They don't interact with their extended family and friends because they can't read. This is shocking. And so we can solve this problem. We should solve this problem. And I think if you care about inequity, if you care about affordability, if you care about civil rights, this has got to be part of that conversation. And the great thing is we've got a blueprint. And right here in New York City, we've got wonderful educators, wonderful schools, both public and private, wonderful universities that are doing this work right now and have done it for ages. We need to use them. You know, I sit on the board of 2 schools that, you know, the Gateway School and the Windward School, they changed my life. Not my high school, not my college. That's why I do work for them. And I volunteer my time for them. You know, we need to bring in their expertise. There are other schools, right? We need to do that so that we can solve this issue for the hundreds of thousands of children who struggle with this every single day.
Shout out to our friend Jamie at the Windward School.
I love Jamie, yes.
Who is a real partner on the Literacy Academy Collective 100%. As well. So those public-private partnerships.
Yeah. Because of Bobby, my very first school visit that I did at Shasta was to the Windward School.
Yep.
Which was bold.
Yes.
But that's how I knew you were going to be great. When let me tell you something. There was a prior chancellor who I called for 2 years in a row to try to go to the Windward School.
It wasn't me. It wasn't me. It wasn't me.
Not Meisha. And so that was, I knew that we were going to be friends very quickly when you did that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I thank you, Bobby. And I thank you because you were an inspiration for me also. And I learned so much from you. And if I give myself any credit, it's just that I listened.
Yeah.
And there was so many of the folks who've been involved with the Literacy Academy Collective. I mean, I met some of the most vocal advocates around this issue, around dyslexia, but ultimately around making sure that our kids became confident readers. And I'm proud of the work that we did. I want to thank you so much for taking the time and coming all the way up to visit us in Harlem.
Yes.
Invite us back. You have a fantastic
home.
Do you have a big Christmas party or 4th of July barbecue?
We need our own party, Bobby.
It's our party. That's right. And Meisha, I mean, the work that you've done over your career, you really are a leader in our community, not just in the Bronx, certainly all over the city. Yep. And you know, you've given so much to us and to our people, and we're very grateful for you.
I just have to say, personally, Meisha, you know, I really feel like I watched you grow up, right? I mean, we were together. How old were you when we got started opening
23.
Yeah,
I knew you before I knew my husband, before I knew before I had a daughter.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. Yeah. It was Meisha and I. And just some of the best years of my life was the 2 of us working together.
Yes. And
doing what we did. And we were learning and growing all at the same time. And I just want you to know how much I love you.
I love you too. Thank you.
I respect you and appreciate you and very grateful for you and for the city and for all that you have done for our communities. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Excellent.
guys.
Yeah.
It was wonderful.
Woo.
Right? That was
That was
great.
painless. That was